Welcome to Spinning Back Click, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a quick spin through the biggest stories in MMA. And on today's episode, Belal Muhammad, remember that name because he's your new welterweight champion. We're going to discuss it. And Tom Aspinall, how about that guy? He handled his business in 1 minute like he always does. Is he the best heavyweight in the world? Paddy Pimblett defeated King Green, or as he's known over here in SoCal, Bobby Green. Can this guy be a world champion one day? Hello, everyone. Gorgeous George on the con here. And look at the distinguished panel we have for you today. It's Goes from MMA Junkie Radio. He's here in the fight capital, Las Vegas. Nolan King joins the program, East Coast representing. He's in Boston. And Danny Segura's back. Great to have you back, Danny. He checks in from the 305. He's down in Miami. Cold Coffee is going to handle the ones and twos, mixing it up for us. Great B-roll. Guys, awesome. But before we get started, if you would kindly hit that like button, I would greatly appreciate it. Please, Chris Goes Wild. I see you in the chat saying, make me. I'm asking. In fact, why stop there? Smash that subscribe button, and you'll have access to our whole library of videos, including past SBCs. Let's get going, guys, in the main event this past Saturday night or Sunday morning, depending on where you were in the world. At UFC 304, Belal Muhammad defeated Leon Edwards to claim the undisputed UFC welterweight title. Impressive performance by the challenger. That's how you go for it. Let's react to that event. Danny, lead off, man.
Surprised. I mean, I thought that Leon Edwards was going to win this pretty comfortably. I even thought he might be able to finish Belal Muhammad, but here he is proving us wrong once again, becoming UFC welterweight champion. And man, I just got to give it up to him. The guy has just been persistent, nonstop throughout his career. He hasn't had an easy road, and now he finds himself at the top of one of the most difficult weight classes in this company and in this entire sport. So huge props to Belal Muhammad. He really shut everyone up, and man, I mean, I think he can go on and do something great here. He looked spectacular against Leon Edwards.
He sure did, man. Nolan King, how about you? Isn't that how you do it, right? If you are going to go to a decision, right, no finish, go to the judges, you snatch it from the guy and leave no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, he went for it. I thought from the opening bell, even like his level of aggression, his pace was surprising to me. I thought midway through the second, I was like, man, he's just really going at Leon. He's really pressuring him. And I was interested to see if he was able to keep that going through all 5 rounds, and he was. I mean, with the exception of the one strong round that Leon had, and then the ending, which swayed some people's 5th round scorecards to go with the damage that Leon gave out at the end. Belal was just pushing the pace. He was on him. He was beating him up with his striking. His takedowns were great. I mean, him just tossing Leon essentially on his head with that spike was incredible. Ooh. So good for Belal Muhammad. You got to be happy for the guy. He's endured a lot of kind of nonsense, and he's kind of gone with the flow in a very difficult period of time where he was inactive. Didn't seem like the UFC was really interested in having him be the next option, and eventually they went with him, and he made the most of it. He's the champ. He has handled himself like a champion even before he had this title, and now that he has it, again, given division new life, and we'll see who's next for him.
Goes, we were doing the watch along. Remember, I clearly remember round 3, Leon taking the back, winning the round. It's 2-1 going into round 4, the championship rounds. What's going to happen, right? This is where their mettle is tested. And then what does Belal Muhammad do? He charges right back at him, dude. He wasn't scared. He wasn't tentative at all, man. I still got goosebumps thinking about this. And I'm sorry. I know a lot of you're going to follow what Dana White says or whatever. Yeah, it wasn't a barn burner, man, but it was a compelling fight. And it was very, very tactical. Goes, what were your thoughts?
For me, it was a weird night. Like, honestly, it can't be any weirder for them, right? They're fighting at a ridiculous time. But when we got to the day, to Saturday, I thought, how much time have we talked about Belal Muhammad being the guy that deserves to be here? He's got to have this fight. He's got to have it. But when it came to fight day, I thought, I don't know if this is going to be really a great fight. For as much as we asked for it, it's probably going to be more of a tactical fight, right? I was never really expecting a barn burner fight. And I thought it played out that way. I thought it was a tactical fight. I thought it was a good fight. But one thing that you can't dismiss is, listen, Belal Muhammad, he used that time to his advantage. He improved as a mixed martial artist. He did some incredible things in that fight, things that we weren't expecting, and definitely things that Leon Edwards wasn't expecting. That spike on the head, I'm glad you guys brought that up. They're gonna have to redo the tail of the tape because that dude is like a couple inches shorter. The way his head impacted his spine, like
Mhm.
you think of like what Fedor went through, or I don't know. That one was pretty brutal, but overall, I wasn't disappointed with the fight. I thought it was pretty interesting. I just thought it was tactical. You're gonna get some of those.
For sure. Yeah. Just thinking about the fact that the UFC's got a great record when it comes to an unblemished record. No deaths, no paralysis, but it's going to be something like that. That's going to, if ever we're going to get a statistic. And thankfully, Leon came right back and kept fighting. Danny, how surprised were you as the fight was unfolding? And let me ask you a question. You may think it's corny or whatever, but when did you think this is a wrap? Did you have to wait till the end, or was there a point during the week, or even at the beginning of the fight, or somewhere where you're like, man, this guy's really got the special sauce tonight?
I mean, not really. I think the whole time I thought that Belal Muhammad, was going to perform admirably, but I thought that Leon Edwards at some point was going to turn things around, right? I did expect him to maybe lose the first, second round because he is generally a slow starter, and Belal Muhammad, we knew that he had to make the most off this opportunity. He's not the most well liked or by at least by the fan base, and certainly not the most well liked by the promotion as well. So we knew that this was his shot. He had to make the most of it. So as the fight started, I more or less expected that. I did think he looked a bit more dominant than I expected. But then you see Leon Edwards win the third round clearly, and I go, okay, now we go here in the championship rounds. Now things are going to get interesting, and that never changed. Belal Muhammad just kept going forward, just kept doing his thing, and his boxing, that's what really impressed me the most. I knew that there was a path to victory there for wrestling, but there was no way in hell he could have stand with Leon Edwards, and that wasn't the case. I mean, he did get the better of him on the feet. And at that point, like in the fourth round, once you start seeing some of the body language of Leon Edwards, you go, man, like this is his spirit's down here, and Belal's spirit is way up there. And there was a clear shift. And I guess I was just kind of waiting for that moment to happen for Leon Edwards. We see his corner give the come on, boy, come on, my son, Leon, this and that. And you think, okay, maybe the head kick's coming, right? Like it's just, and this is the way it's supposed to happen. But that moment just never came. So yeah, at no point did I think it was a wrap, but throughout the fight, it was kind of eye-opening. And then once you see the decision, you're like, oh shit, like Belal's really good, man. This guy's the world's best.
He told Goz and I earlier in the week he smelled fear in that elevator. Then we see the video and we're like, well, I don't think Leon looked like he was smelling fear at that moment. But Belal was staring down the whole team. His homie was laying on him like little Chris in Back to Boys in the Hood. But it was something about that first round when Leon was standing and he was staring into space, and his corner was just like, you got to do this, you got to do that. But he looked like he was out of it at the end of the first round because Belal had taken it to him. He took him down. He stood with him. And even though Leon got back up, he took him back down. And I could tell right there, I go, this guy's going to be a world champion tonight. 14 months, Nolan King. Can you believe that? 14 months this guy came in and like I say, rose to the occasion at the right time at 5:30 a.m. local time. So he was the visiting game, although some are saying that might have benefited him, the time change, right? He's got options. What do you do next for Belal Muhammad, Nolan King, in that stacked welterweight division?
Yeah, I think Shavkat's the fight. I think that's the one that's the most intriguing. I think when you look at the division, you say, who could be the best welterweight on earth that doesn't have a belt? I think Shavkat has the biggest stakes of that right now. I don't know what the timeline will be if it lines up well for the UFC and what they're planning. I know Belal's got a big cut on his nose, but to me, I mean, you throw that fight in Abu Dhabi in October or something, and granted that's kind of a short turnaround, but even next year, I mean, put it somewhere that the fan base can gravitate towards it. But I think that's a great fight. I think Shavkat has looked pretty invincible thus far, and it's just really intriguing. So Belal I know he's a guy that always embraces the toughest challenges, and I think that is Shavkat Rakhmonov right now.
Nolan, as you said that, I glanced at the calendar. It's still 3 months away. And maybe I go on too many of these corny YouTube channels or websites, and I thought I saw something where Makhachev might be nursing an injury, might not be ready. I wouldn't be surprised if they actually made this matchup. Do you like that one goes? Or a lot of people have been saying, what about Kamaru Usman? Let's bring the former champion back since Leon Edwards is out of the way.
Now, I have nothing against that fight. That's something that I kind of found interesting as well. But I think you have to kind of look at how the UFC's been treating Belal Muhammad, and I feel like they're just going to throw the kitchen sink at this dude. And if you're going to do that, like Nolan said, Shavkat's that guy. You want to throw him at him. So I think that's probably where they'll end up. I wouldn't be shocked though if they did Kamaru Usman. That's not a bad one.
I wouldn't be shocked if the UFC said, Bilal, you got Pajeda next. Danny Segura, how about you, man? Break the tie or whatever. Maybe throw out another name because, again, it's stacked, right? Ian Gary's undefeated. He's controversial as well. What do you do here? And then start the conversation off for Edwards, too. Give me a little bit of both guys.
I think Nolan is on the money on this one. I think it's got to be Shavkat. For starters, if we're going to go with the UFC's rankings, he is the highest ranked sort of opponent available, right? Sitting at number 3. You can make the case for Usman. He's still at number 1 somehow, even though he's on a 3-fight losing streak and hasn't won in quite some time. I would hate to see Kamaru Usman get a shot. I think, look, give him one more fight. If he can get past somebody, then okay, give him a shot. He's done so much that he doesn't have to make the line. But at this point in time, the most deserving guy is Shavkat. And I mean, who doesn't want to see Shavkat fight? I think that'd be a fantastic fight. And as you mentioned, I think it's a great idea to put him in October when the UFC returns to Abu Dhabi. Look, Muhammad is 36 years old, right? Like his time at the top is limited. He's not a champion with 24 and has 10 years in the sport. No, he's got to make stuff happen. So I think he's got to be as active as possible. I like that October date. For Leon Edwards, man, this one to me, this loss like made him look pretty bad. Like he just looked defeated out there. His bread and butter is the striking, and a guy that historically is a wrestler outstruck him. I think he's got to take a step back. I don't know, maybe a fight against Jack Della Maddalena would be a lot of fun. A fight with Ian Gary, that would be a lot of fun. Remember, these two, someone got beef. They used to train together. And Ian Gary got kicked out of his gym as he was rising up the ranks. Obviously, that kind of got buried because it was some time ago, but you can definitely sort of bring back that rivalry or that story and make a little bit of a grudge match out of it. And it makes sense from a divisional standpoint. So I would suggest Ian Gary for Leon Edwards. Why not?
It got buried because he gets kicked out of a lot of gyms in addition. But go ahead, Goes.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I think a lot of times after a big loss like this, we kind of say the same thing, right? Like he needs to take some time. And in this particular instant, I don't think he's got to take some time because he's banged up. I think he needs to take some time to really figure out, go through that footage and look and see what actually happened to him. Because George, I know exactly what you're talking about. That look on his face at the end of round 1, he was not expecting that. And he did. It seems like, you know, obviously in the Kamaru Usman, he figured it out, but he figured it out in the 5th round. And that's just not a position you want to be in every fight. I think it was Danny or Nolan, one of you guys said, he just traditionally starts slow. And that's something that I've always found in mixed martial arts. It's just not acceptable. The fight's not that long. You have to cherish every second of that fight. You have to take it serious. And that's something that kind of continuously happens with Leon Edwards. You got to go back. You got to watch that footage and you got to figure out how to get better. That's what Belal Muhammad did in that time off. He got better.
Yeah. And look, I don't want to glaze all over Belal, but I'm telling you, man, now that I go back, I can see him. He was really, really confident. This dude, what about even the flinch? Like you could just see he was comfortable. Like he was prepared, confident, comfortable. He didn't flinch. He was laughing at him. He was right up in his face. And again, he was the visiting side getting booed mercilessly. So you're disliked by the fans. You can already tell you're not the promotion's favorite guy either. But somehow homeboy rose to the occasion. I can't give him enough of a fist bump. Congrats to Belal Muhammad. Let me give some shout outs again. Chris Goes Wild. I shouted him out earlier. He's here every week. Raja Muhammad checking in via Facebook, and he's out in India. What's up, my man? Beavis and Butthead. How long are you on for? It's a 1-hour show every Monday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. You can catch the replay later on if you missed some of it. Quay Stefan. I want to give you a shout out as well. All right, Scott Christian, I always see him as well. Thank you all for tuning in. I love all those matchups, and I love the possibility of him just staying busy. And if he can get down in Abu Dhabi, I think he would be in favor of that as well. I didn't realize we're still 3 months away, and I think that's a strong possibility. And he's got a plethora of names, and maybe this brings back Kamaru Usman, or maybe this we do move on to Shavkat Rakhmonov. I don't know, man, but what they should have is like a foursome of fights in the welterweight division, or even have 6 fighters and just stack it with welterweights. I think it would be really, really exciting. All right, let's move on to the heavyweight division. I mean, look, there's not too much to talk about in terms of the fight, but obviously what's next is going to be huge. Tom Aspinall did what he normally does. First round stoppage. Very impressive. Quick work by the Englishman, and it looks like he's headed to New York to be the alternate at UFC 309. He's open to it, and that's what the UFC wants. It's not official. That's where Jones versus Miocic is taking place, and I think it's on November 9th, if you're wondering. What did you think of this goes? Like I say, not much to go over with this quick KO. Curtis Blades, the wrestler, chose not to wrestle, instead throw hands, and he lost.
Yeah, I looked like a fool at the end of this one because I was telling people for weeks, like, I feel like we're overlooking Blades a little bit. I honestly thought he'd give him a harder time, but he never used the one tool that Tom Aspinall probably prepared for the most, and that was his wrestling, right? Tom, on the other hand, great game plan. He looked like a guy that was like on his 4th title defense or something. He looked like he had been there multiple times. He came into the fight in great shape. He said all the right things. He was patient. And like I said, the game plan was excellent. It was just another solid performance from Tom Aspinall. And what he does at the end of every fight, not every fighter does this. He leaves you wanting more. You want to see him right away. And I love that about a fighter. And Tom Aspinall has just been incredible so far.
Goes, is he the best heavyweight on the planet at this moment? And that includes me asking about John Jones and Francis Ngannou.
That's such a difficult question because, at the end of the day, for as destructive as Tom Aspinall has been, there are still a few questions that you would like to have answered, right? Like, what would he be like in championship rounds? It's such an important thing when you're talking about fighters at this level. What happens when he gets put on his back? But at the same time, we can't really have answers for that because he's just so destructive. Like, I honestly think if you look at it, you look at Francis Ngannou, he hasn't had an MMA fight in a while, neither has John Jones.
2.5 years for Ngannou.
I think I'm pretty comfortable saying, yeah, I think he is.
Mm-hmm. Danny, let's lead off with that. Well, no, let's get your reaction to the fight. I know it was quick, and then I want you to answer who is the best heavyweight on the planet at this moment.
My reaction is, damn, like Tom Aspinall is unreal. This guy is just a ridiculous talent. I mean, just back to back, he's just running through all these heavyweights. How many first round stoppages does he have in his record? And if they make it out of the first, he makes sure to put them out in the second. This guy's just incredible. And it's just incredible how humble he is too. Like, you would think that in his post-fight interview, he would have something to say to John Jones and the rest of the division. And look, he's got all the record to back it up and be brash and cocky and this and that, but he's the most humble guy out there. So props to Tom Aspinall. Fantastic performance. And as far as who's the best heavyweight on the planet, I think this is a pretty easy answer. It's him. It's him. Look at what he's done sporting wise. Who is the most relevant heavyweight right now? It is him. John Jones hasn't fought in forever. His only victory has came against Cyril Gane, who took the fight on short notice, this, and that. I mean, you can't compare that to everything that Tom Aspinall has done in the last few years. To me, it's pretty easy. Tom Aspinall is the best heavyweight on the planet. And I don't, whatever Nolan's going to say next, I don't know if he's going to agree with me or not, but there's nobody that can change my mind on that.
Well, Nolan, you're up. Reaction to the fight, and is Tom Aspinall the best heavyweight in the world right now?
Much as I want to argue with Danny, I can't. Right now, at this point in time, I don't know how you can deny him. I mean, he's the most proven heavyweight. He has gone out there and ran through a number of different top contenders, some of them in a minute's time. He's the guy. I mean, I don't think you could craft. Sure, there's areas you can improve in, but I don't think conceptually you could craft a more perfect heavyweight. I mean, the guy goes in there. His fights are going to be quick. He's going to get a finish. He's going to carry himself so well too. What a great representative of the sport. He has a great personality, but he's pretty classy. He's professional. So I think he just checks so many boxes. And I think with this performance, he's finally kind of crossed over into maybe having that sort of mainstream appeal. Like, I feel like the buzz coming out of this about him fighting John is way more than it was him coming out of the interim fight, despite having that belt. So I think that was massive for his brand on Saturday. I think he's really got the MMA world buzzing. I mean, even Dana's up there kind of, sure, he's still committed to the Stipe Jones fight that I don't think he'll ever let go of. but at the same time, like he's just very much acknowledging like that is a fantastic fight. So like I said, what a great representative of the sport, what a great fighter, and how awesome is it that we get to see how him continue to compete and potentially align himself for that John Jones fight if John's willing to take one more after the Stipe fight.
Danny, somehow Democrats told Biden, you need to get out, dog. Right? And that's the most powerful position on the planet. Can somehow the matchmakers or the fans or anyone at the UFC go, Dana, you got to scrap that fight, dog, and go with Aspinall and Jones and not Jones versus Miocic?
I feel like there's got to be people telling Dana that. I mean, look, sure, like on paper, us that we're OGs, we've been around this game for quite some time. Like John Jones versus Stipe Miocic, you hear that and okay, that has a nice ring to it, right? Like we know these guys have tons of history and they represent a lot in this sport. But dude, I really question what's the popularity today of Stipe Miocic. He hasn't fought in forever. In his most recent fight, he didn't look great. We know that there's been a huge turnover of the fan base. I would argue that Tom Aspinall might be even more well-known than Stipe Miocic at this point in time. Sure, Miocic might be able to drag out some of those old school guys that maybe are not tuning in as much and they hear the Miocic name. They want to see him fight one more time. But really, I don't know. I think Aspinall is the guy. I hope they make this fight. This is the fight to make. John Jones versus Tom Aspinall. It is the most relevant fight to make. And as Aspinall continues to fight and continues to win, that fight with Jones and Miocic just seems more and more and more and more irrelevant. Like by the time this rolls out in November, if it even does, I think we're all just going to be looking at Aspinall and being like, yeah, whatever happens, that's still our guy. That's still the best heavyweight in the planet.
And on top of it all, Nolan, the winner might retire. They both might retire. And then they'd be back in another pickle where now they just go, oh, remember that guy in England that was the alternate and weighed in and you didn't see him? He's the champ now. I mean, like the coronation is part of the fun of it, you know, and if you're a veteran champ, that's why you let that guy challenge you, you know, and if you win, you get a ruby. You're still the champ, title defense, and if you lose, then it's the coronation. It's time for the new guy. But what are your thoughts here, man? My head's about to explode on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I really hope we see it. I think John's kind of always gone to the beat of his own drum, and I do think there is an element of him that really just wanted to have one more fight. Like before even Tom was in the picture, I think there was an element of him that was just kind of getting towards, at least for now, not feeling like he wanted to fight beyond it. Now that this exists, though, man, I think the fact that this Stipe fight is happening, there's an element that's an underlying element to this fight promotion, which is the fact that the waiting game is going on. There's the build, right? Like, I think the build is such a big part when it comes to a fight truly being big, right? Like people talking about this, people wanting it. It's contingent on certain things. Now you have Tom Aspinall. He won. He's ready to go. If John goes out there and beats Stipe, then I think it will take things to the next level. So while we can debate of whether or not which fight should be next, if that Stipe fight does happen next, which it sounds like it will, I do think it adds another layer of people talking about it, people buzzing about it. I'm sure that fight week, even though John's going to be fighting Stipe, Tom Aspinall is going to be brought up quite constantly in the media day, in the interviews. And then you'll have that moment if John wins where it's like, all right, well, now it's here. Now it's time to try to plan this thing out. Let's see if John wants it. Let's see what's going to happen. Like, I think we sometimes overlook the fact that there is that build that plays right into the UFC's hands in making a fight so big, that's been talked about for a year and a half.
1 year ago, I didn't like it. 1 year later, I like it even less. How about you guys? I'm just going through all the scenarios. John wins,
and then for us, I'm so sick of talking about it. By the time I get there, I'll be like, please just fight. Like
I'd almost not have Tom there. Why even have Tom there at that point? Yeah,
I was about to say that. Like, honestly, why are we here? Right? Aren't we here to find out who the best fighter in the world is? Are we answering that question with Stipe Miocic versus John Jones? We're not.
Nope.
So why are we doing it? And at the end of the day, let's just say something happened to Miocic and he can't fight. Do you really want to take the heavyweight championship of the world and pull a curtain back and go, how about you? You ready? Like, that doesn't make any sense. I almost don't want him to take a fight under those pretenses. Like, I want to build up. I think it's important. I think it's so ridiculous. Every day that goes by, this fight gets even more and more ridiculous. And one thing we never talk about is, what if John Jones doesn't make it to the fight? What if it's Miocic and Aspinall? Like it's such a mess, dude. It's so stupid to even do this at this point. I really don't understand it. And you know what? I will tell you this: if Stipe Miocic wins that fight, Dana White will be unbearable, guys. He'll be almost like Thanos when he puts that last jewel in his glove and just glows and shit. Like we'll never hear the end of it.
What do you mean?
I told you guys, Stipe Jones. You guys crapped on it.
I
He'll
thought you
be
meant
unbearable.
I thought you meant the way he's
And
been
that could
promoting
actually happen.
Jones
You
on
never
every
know.
podcast being the most dangerous man that's ever walked the planet or whatever, even shifting aside the Muhammad Ali's of the world and the Mike Tysons. And if you go in a closet with John Jones, you don't come out, or you're parted
George,
into, or
this is such a big loss when you, because honestly, guys, what have we been talking about? If you really want to know who the best heavyweight in the world is, I don't even know that you throw John Jones and Stipe Miocic's name in there. I think that's between Francis Ngannou and Tom Aspinall. But we don't get to have that fight. We have to settle right now.
Yeah.
I mean, the
That's a fair
dude's
argument.
1-0 as a heavyweight. Like, again, I'll give him his flowers. Greatest of all time is John Jones. Greatest light heavyweight of all time is John Jones. Greatest champion of all time, I'd say, well, I think it's John Jones and Demetrius Johnson. They're tied, but because this guy won 2 titles, I'd probably go, all right, I'll lean John Jones. But greatest heavyweight on the planet at this moment, yeah, you're right. He might not even be the best or number 2 if you still think it's Ngannou. I mean, I don't know, man, but it's such a force down our throats, and I can't stand it, man. I love chopping it up with you guys. Hopefully I don't drive you nuts on the topic, because it does come up a lot. But man, after seeing Aspinall just disposed of him like that, and again, Jones is only 1-0 as a heavyweight, right? And he struggled in his last few fights as a light heavyweight, like 3.5 years before he did that as a heavyweight. So I'm not seeing this monster that he is. He was a monster at light heavyweight, but at the end he was really, really struggling. I'm seeing a monster in Tom Aspinall.
Yeah. He's the best heavyweight on the planet. I think we can all agree on that. I think we should move on from this topic.
We should. Aside from those 2 title fights, good point, Danny. I thought the rest of the card was entertaining. So let's talk about it. Let's start with Paddy Pimblett submits Bobby Green, goes. Why is Bobby Green turning into a wrestler? I mean, I know he wrestled in college, but the dude loves to throw hands, talk shit, turning it into a street fight, keep his hands down. What is he doing?
Well, I think he did it because he wasn't getting what he thought he was going to get out of Paddy Pimblett, right? When you sit there and you try and get in under somebody's skin, you assume they're going to want to come after you, throw punches. Paddy Pimblett was very, very calm and collective, and Bobby wasn't able to counter off of what he did. So I think he was just getting frustrated himself, and he shot in out of frustration. And Paddy Pimblett, this guy is honestly, he's making a jump every fight. I thought he looked great out there, and he made a move off of a mistake that King Green did, and he took advantage of it. Paddy Pimblett is making strides now. I think that was, a very, very good victory. But I mean, look, he might have actually been the biggest winner of the weekend, right? 2 bonuses, new contract. He made Bobby
don't get
King
me
look
started
not very
with
good.
bonuses.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think overall that was a great performance for that guy. I was not expecting that. I was one of the guys that said I thought Bobby Green was going to win the fight. I thought, if anything, I thought he was going to give him a better fight.
Yeah, maybe he needs to go back to Bobby Green, because King Green made a huge mistake. Bobby Green would not have made that mistake. Nolan, what was your reaction to the fight? It was quick, probably frustrating to watch. We want to see these things unfold a little bit, right?
Yeah, but I mean, honestly, it was fantastic. It was just a great submission by Paddy. I know that the IQ, fight IQ, and the decision making from Bobby King can certainly be under the microscope there. And there's probably a lot of things that he wishes that he did differently. But for Paddy, I think this fight really got rid of some of those detractors that questioned his level of competition, that questioned his ability to beat, maybe a guy. Right, I think King was ranked 15, so. He's going to probably enter the rankings. That was a legitimate win. I don't think anybody can question it. It was dominant. And honestly, like, if you look at who's up from King Green, whoever Paddy Pimblett fights next is going to be another very, very legitimate test. I mean, that lightweight division is really stacked right now. He brought up Renato Moicano and Benoit Saint Denis. But you also got guys hanging out there like Jalen Turner, like Rafael Dos Anjos. So Very interesting times at 155, as always, one of the best divisions year in and year out in the UFC. But yeah, I think Patty has really been able to he really shook the critics who maybe said, oh, he hadn't been tested. He hadn't really beaten Jared Gordon. He fought Tony Ferguson that was washed up. Like, if you beat Bobby Green, like, welcome to the rankings, at this point in time. And I think that's come Monday or come tomorrow, Tuesday, we're going to see that probably a 15 next to his name.
Mm-hmm. Danny Segura, were you impressed? I mean, it was kind of a layup. King Green gave him, the alley-oop. The other guy slammed it. And what do you think is his upside here, Patty Pimblett? Should we start getting excited, man? Are we being unfair to him?
I gotta admit, I've been unfair to Patty Pimblett, and I gotta admit I've been wrong this entire time. I am one of the, and I quote here, dickheads that said that Patty Pimblett was never gonna make it into the UFC rankings, that he wasn't a quality fighter. And sure, like, is he good enough to be in the UFC, which is already a feat in itself? Yes. I thought he was just going to ling around the top 20, 25 best fighters at lightweight, which is an incredibly difficult division. But that's it. I mean, the guy going into this fight, I think at this point he has 25 fights. He's almost 30 years old. He was champion at Cage Warriors. Like, he has a ton of experience, and we never really saw tons of improvement or tons of change in between fights. And yeah, I thought he lost to Jared Gordon. The fight against Tony Ferguson, was against this version of Tony Ferguson. So I just kind of thought he was who he was. And look, we're looking at highlights there of him leaving his chin exposed and hands down. But in this fight is the first fight that we actually see noticeable improvement. He had his hands up, his guard up. He managed the distance well. Those kicks were really good. And he clearly made Bobby Green uncomfortable, a guy that's actually very good and very skilled in the striking department. So Patty Pimblett is getting better. He proved me wrong, and he rightfully deserves to be in the rankings. And now I'm looking forward to see where he goes from here, because he shattered what I thought his image and his expectations were in the sport. Now I think the sky's the limit. I'm not going to say he's the next, future champion at lightweight, but certainly if he proved that he can continue to improve, then who knows? Maybe he does have potential to go in the top 10 and maybe even make a run for the title.
All right. Well, like I say, possibly we have been unfair to him, but the fights that he has fought, it just doesn't seem like he's getting the best version of those fighters at their prime. And so, but it's his job to put away an aging veteran.
Right.
It sounds like you're not sold on
I'm not sold. I'm
Don't
not
be a
sold.
dickhead, George.
I'm not sold. You got to rank him because his stats, his overall record, his UFC record is nice. I can't go against that portfolio. But again, controversial win against Gordon. And then Tony Ferguson. I mean, what was that? The 7th of 8 fights that he's taken the straight L's. And then Bobby Green decides to wrestle when he never wrestles. So we don't. That's why he hasn't been submitted, because it's hard to take him down, and he usually lights you up, or at least just keeps it standing. So yeah, I guess I still haven't seen the evidence that tells me anything. I'm gonna jump ahead. Can he be a world champ, guys? Patty Pimblett. Quick round the horn, Danny.
I'm gonna still be a dickhead and say no, but he is improving.
Does he come close, even if he's not a champ? Does he come close?
Man, I don't know. Again, I have this one image of Patty Pimblett, and I saw him improve. I actually saw noticeable improvements, which is something that I didn't expect. So my brain is kind of remapping and reorganizing sort of my expectation and what I think of him. But I would say no.
All right. How about you, Nolan? Real quick, do you think he can be a world champion?
Just saying,
not come close.
Playing the odds game, I would say no. I think there's still some striking defense improvement that I would need to see. I just haven't seen him. Like, I would have liked to see it in this fight if there was a few more exchanges, how he would have dealt with it. But luckily for him, he didn't have to show off if he's improved or not. I'm going to lean towards no, but I think he could crack the top 10.
Goes?
You can't be good in this division and win a championship. You have to be great. And I don't know that he can reach that.
He did look leaner. Says he didn't let his weight get out of hand. He does. His techniques look better for sure. But yeah, I'm still not seeing world championship caliber. So no on the title. Can he get close? I'm not even sure yet. I guess I'll just leave it at that. And I'll be a dickhead. How about this Gregory Rodriguez? Holy cow. I mean, whatever he hits you with, he is a tank. He doesn't seem to tire. And then we know his accolades on the ground. I'm really, really pumped up about RoboCop. Cool nickname too. Nolan, How about you, man? Let's start off with just what do you think about Gregory Rodriguez? And I'll just give you the same question. Can he start inching towards the title? Like, is he showing you that type of promise?
I'm not sure about that. Again, I kind of maybe we put him in the same I can't even say it. Categorization as Paddy Pimblett. I don't know why that word was so difficult, but a guy that can crack the top 15, maybe he can crack the top 10. But I still would like to. I have the ghosts of his losses past in my brain, the times that we've seen him beat. So very impressive performance. Christian Leroy Duncan, I think, is maybe a more familiar name to a lot of fight fans, but in a few years that win will age well. It'll be one they look back and say, oh, that was actually a pretty good win. So he's always fun. He's always game. I was expecting maybe somebody to get finished in that fight, but still, nonetheless, they put him. The UFC elevated him into a big spot. He went out there and delivered, and I'm sure he'll align himself with some sort of ranked matchup next.
Mm-hmm. What do you think goes Gregory Rodriguez?
To be a champion is your question, right?
Yeah. What's his promise? I mean, great. I thought he showed us a lot in those 15 minutes. Duncan wouldn't go away, but like I say, just everything he hits you with, it's like, oh.
Yeah, I think he's a tough out. I think he can keep on a streak, but I don't know that he can fight the elite.
Man, I think he could knock out Dricus with that kind of power. And on
possible,
the ground, I think he'd be formidable against Dricus. I think he can be a world champ one day, guys.
Think so?
Yeah, I really do think that. Maybe I'm getting out of hand here. I don't know. Let's continue down the card. Two other guys that looked great: Arnold Allen, Nathaniel Wood. And let me just say this: Arnold Allen didn't look great in round 1, but he definitely turned it around in rounds 2 and 3 over a tough Giga Chikadze, because a lot of that fight was standing. Nathaniel Wood, man, he couldn't put Daniel Pineda away, and I salute Daniel Pineda. He could have taken the easy way out when the doctor was examining him and he had a cut. He said, "Chale, let's keep going." Danny, man, what were your thoughts on those two fights, and what do you think of those two Englishmen? Could we be talking about them one day the same way we are about Edwards and Aspinall? We were talking about them in title fights this past weekend.
Nathaniel Wood, I'm not so sure at this point in time, but he is good, and the UK has a nice skilled featherweight that I'm sure he's going to continue to get victories and go up the rankings. I do feel like at some point he's going to be among the best, but future champion, I don't know. Arnold Allen, on the other hand, that is an interesting ask. I do think that he is improving. He showed some nice adjustments in that fight. As you said, he lost the first, and then he came back and did some adjustments to win the second and third. I think at some point, because he's still fairly young, the division is going to age out a little bit, right? Like we're already seeing the Volkanovskis go. I think at some point some other names will also leave the top, and we're going to get the new blood. And I think Arnold Allen is part of that. I do think that at some point I get a feeling that he is going to challenge for a belt. Would he be champion? We'll see who's at the top then, but I do think this guy has potential to fight for the title.
Danny, as you said that the other day, I was watching McGregor versus Holloway, and that's nowhere near the version of Holloway and what he became. That was a featherweight bout. He got checked, and then he came back and became one of the greatest ever. So, yeah, I could see that possibly with Allen. I'm with you on that one. All right. How about Mohamed Mokaev against Manel Kape? This fight was supposed to kind of have a big spotlight on it, where the winner could even be fighting for a world title, but they've had their problems with Kape. He pulls out of a lot of fights, I guess, and he's had issues with weight. But he's on point this time, makes weight, looks great. I thought he won. And then Mokaev, in big fights, he just hasn't shown up. These guys have had altercations. In the end, Mokaev 7-0 in the UFC, 12-0 overall. But the UFC doesn't want him, Nolan King. Does that make any sense to you? They're already basically sending him a one-way ticket to the PFL.
It's unusual. I would say, again, we don't know all the details and the ins and outs of what went on behind the scenes, but certainly we have enough evidence also in the public eye about what happened. So I can't necessarily be mad at the decision to part from him. I think it's super complex. I think having a really young fighter who's maybe not that exciting, but also is going out there and beating your top talent, but then also has seemingly, some pretty severe antics outside the cage, including sucker punching somebody after you take a picture with them. Obviously, there's a lot to process there, right? How do you add up that equation and come to a final solution? I don't think it's the worst decision in the world. Like, I see a lot of improvement possible for Mikhaev, and maybe he'll finally reach that really elite level by getting competition outside the UFC elsewhere, whether it's ONE, whether it's PFL. And he's still young enough too, where like, who's to say 5 years from now, if he goes out there and he proves himself to be one of the best in the world in another organization, that the UFC won't circle back. But to me, like the antics that were going on, what we were hearing, kind of the admission of throwing that punch, like I can't really complain, so to speak. It's unfortunate for the division. I've always thought fans are a little too hard on him in terms of his fighting style. Like, sure, he doesn't throw many strikes. We know what he's going to do. It's not that exciting. But at the same time, he's 23. So, and he's fighting top 10 guys in the world. So I was willing to maybe give him some more time to develop into an exciting fighter. But it is what it is. I'm not really passionate one way or another. If they'd kept him around, if they'd gotten rid of him, I certainly understand the decision to part ways with him.
Nolan, you were recently nominated for Best Journalist. So I know you got sources. I know you hear stuff. What do you think might be the version of, and this is all speculation, of he's difficult, the matchmakers feel like he's difficult? What do you think that means? Like, does he turn down a lot of fights? Or was it the fact that he took a pick and then sucker punched the guy? Or what? I don't know. What could that be? Like, just help us interpret it a little bit. And again, full disclosure, I'm not saying you know exactly what's happening, but you might have a better idea than me. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the feedback, or I think the feedback the matchmakers give a lot are, guys that are being difficult about opponents, about dates, about calling for opportunities that the promotion maybe feels that they haven't earned yet. Whether that's, hey, I don't want to fight that guy because what do I have to gain from this? Or, hey, I don't want to fight on that weekend. Can we do it in Abu Dhabi instead? Stuff like that. So there's those sort of aspects. I do think there is some sort of feedback too that's given to the fighters that's like, hey, like, I don't find, the matchmakers don't find this person particularly exciting. But that's something that we hear a lot of. And sure, like we saw recently with, I interviewed Nate Maness, who's 5-2 in the UFC. He came to the end of his contract and they didn't renew him. He heard back, even though he had 3 performance bonuses, that the reason they weren't going to re-sign him was because he wasn't exciting. So there's certain times where I think excitement does come into play, but we don't really see it when it comes to a guy that's in the top 5. So I think there has to be more to the story than that. It has to be either, their decisions on matchmaking not aligning, or some sort of communication stuff. And I'm sure, again, if they're constantly running into this issue where they have to have security, there's things at the PI, there's stuff at the hotel, there's stuff at the weigh-ins. There's certain people that I think can kind of get away with that. And we could have an hour-long discussion about double standards and whatnot when it comes to this. But I can't argue with the fact that that's being discouraged, that you shouldn't be punching people at the hotel, that you shouldn't be, getting in fights at the PI. So I'm sure, again, Dana was a little cryptic, but if I had to guess, the matchmakers, there's certain things that tick them off. And I feel like, not being communicative, turning things down, trying to call your own shots all the time, or asking for things that are too, there's a million different possibilities, but I'm guessing that was probably part of it as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you, man. I'd love to talk about this topic a little bit more. We got to move on because this weekend has a stacked card in the Middle East. It's UFC on ABC 7. They're bringing some big names to UFC. 2 of them fell off because of Nick Diaz. We won't see Vicente Luque, but look, there's going to be a lot of eyeballs because it's going to be on ESPN and ABC. Bantamweight's my favorite division, so I'm pumped. What say you? Let's talk about Corey Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov at the top of the bill. What's the importance of this bout, and who wins, Danny?
Man, it's huge. I mean, this fight, I think, could determine the next title challenger at 135 pounds, especially if it's Corey Sandhagen, given that he's ranked number 2. Now, I can see a case where Umar gets a shot. He is ranked number 10, but heck, if he beats Corey Sandhagen, I would say he's pretty deserving. And the guys that are at the top right now, in the top 5, they're all coming off losses or perhaps are just getting back into their winning ways. Talking about Peter Yan, Chito Era, Henry Cejudo, right? So I think the winner here will likely end up fighting for the belt. The winner of Dvalishvili and O'Malley. So we'll see. So yeah, it's an extremely important fight. Very exciting fight as well, styles-wise. And I still don't have much of a pick. I'm gonna go with Sanhagen, but man, Nurmagomedov, that name holds a lot of weight, right? And he has proven to be a tough out for everyone. So I can see a world where he wins a decision, but I got to go with Sanhagen. He's sort of the more proven guy. And look, in his last few fights, he's shown a lot of wrestling actually, and maybe he'll be able to fend off some of the takedowns and beat him on the feet.
Shara Magomedov is him and Olecheknik. They're stepping in for Luque versus Diaz. That guy's kind of popular. He's got that look, right?
Mm-hmm.
But your thoughts, man, on this? You think Shara Magomedov might steal the show out there? You know, they love him out there, and undefeated. Looks like the UFC's kind of getting behind him a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's going to be maybe a slow rise. He is very charismatic. I think a lot of people like him. And I think he's a good fighter, and I think there is room for improvement. I think he is going to be getting better, and I think he's a guy that we have to keep our eye on.
That guy's got to be the villain on Taken 4. Liam Neeson, is that his name? The star of those movies?
Uh-huh.
Book
I don't
that
know
guy,
who
man.
you are.
Book that guy. He
point,
should be on those types of movies, man.
If there's a fourth movie, I think the villain's got to be Liam Neeson, right? Letting that many people get taken that many times, like, come on.
Yeah, something's weird going on there.
Hasn't his daughter's gotten taken twice, hasn't she?
Yeah, you kind of suck at your job at that point.
Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, I'm gonna step in here and I'm gonna call upset alert. I think Shara Magomedov loses this Saturday. I'm not sold on it. Yeah, the hair's nice, the beard's nice. You know, the whole thing with the eye, like he looks badass. I'm not gonna lie, and I'm glad that he got that movie role. But I am not sold. I am not sold. Just because he looks cool, just because he can talk well, that doesn't mean you can fight well. From what I've seen so far, I'm not sold. I'm taking Michael. I think he's winning a decision. You heard it here first.
I like it. How about Figgy? Are you excited about Figgy, Nolan? He's obviously been on a roll since coming up from 125, where he was a world champion. What are your thoughts on him versus Marlon Vera? And by the way, I think Vera's taking this fight a little too soon, but he's a grown-ass man. He signed the contract. Talk about this matchup again in my favorite division, the bantamweight division.
Yeah, no, this card's awesome. I mean, you look at the depth on it. These sort of fights frustrate me as somebody that's trying to be an analyst, but I also love them because of that. There's just so many intangibles, right? You got Davison, who's kind of still figuring himself out at 135. We're still figuring him out at 135 as well. And then you got Marlon, who kind of had a very close fight against Pedro Munoz to earn that title shot. Then he goes out there and really takes a tremendous amount of damage from Sean O'Malley. So I don't know how he'll look coming back, as you said. What is this? 5 months later, 4 months later, something like that. That's a quick turnaround time for a guy that took that knee that Sean O'Malley hit him with too. So I'm intrigued by this fight. I'm kind of leaning towards Davison, but I still am not really confident because I'm not sure how his body will be at this weight class. Cody, who he fought last, is also kind of on the smaller side of 135. We've seen him try 125 before as well. So great fight. It's kind of a shame some of these are only 3 rounds, but some day fights, some really meaningful contender fights. I can't complain. This is a great card.
Day fights, yes. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm so excited for that card.
Make up for last week a little bit.
In the chat room, let's see here. Karate Ted Toon says Figgy is much faster. I imagine he's leaning in that direction. Sky V's and El Daddy says big overall MMA test for Shara, but I'm intrigued. Somebody was agreeing with you, Danny. Let's see here. Josh Wallace, he's also picking Mikhail Olenechik versus Shara Magomedov. Karate Ted Toon says, I tell my students not to throw naked kicks until I see them work. I think he's talking about Shara. He says no telegraph on them bullet kicks. EQ says this is Usmar's first ever ranked opponent. Huge jump in competition. Give me the Sandman on the money line. I kind of agree. I know that Umar is that boogeyman and nobody wants to fight him and this and that, but nobody wanted to fight Hamza Shemaev, and then Gilbert Burns kind of exposed a little bit, and then Kamaru Usman had a good run at him. So yeah, I'm not convinced until you get in there with the top cats. I agree with you, EQ. I'm liking Sandhagen in this fight too, and I also think Figgy is the real deal at 135 pounds. I think he could be a future champion. How about you guys? Real quick, Goes Figgy, future champ?
I'm gonna say no. What he's done so far has been pretty impressive, but that is a long road.
Can't connect on O'Malley's jaw.
I don't think so. I mean, look, if you
No?
plug him into that fight, does he have a
Yeah.
chance? Yeah, of course. But it's the road there, the road through those killers.
Yeah. Danny, what do you think?
Oh man, such a tough one. I do think he fights for the belt. I like what I'm seeing from Figueiredo at 35. He's using a lot of his wrestling and his jiu-jitsu, something we didn't see at 125 because he didn't have the gas tank because it was cutting so damn much weight. So he is a better fighter at 135. He's looking great. He fights for the belt. But man, if Dvalishvili becomes champion, which I think that's what's gonna happen, I don't think anyone will take that belt from him, at least for some time. And that guy just is incredible.
Tough Mexican, the Dvalishvili. All right, how about you, Nolan King? Can Figure be a world champ?
I think it's too tough, man. I think he already was a world champion, right? So we saw him. I think he went out and accomplished great things. To do it again and 135 would be absolutely incredible, and I'm not ruling him out. But when I look at this division, I see guys like the Sandhagens, like the Umars of the world that are even those fights just to get your shot at gold. I think it's going to be an uphill climb. Not saying he can't do it, but I would lean towards no.
No, and I'm staying with you here. What about Tony Ferguson? Quietly, he's on this card against Michael Chiesa. You know the same thing's going to happen. Is this his last one, win or lose? Do you even think he's going to win? And then Michael Chiesa, he's not, no spring chicken either. Definitely has a future in broadcasting, knows the sport in and out. What are your thoughts on this fight and both of these guys and where they're at in their careers?
Yeah, they're both fan favorites for a reason. I think I have a lot of respect for both guys, but they're clearly towards the really tail end of their careers, particularly Tony. I thought, Michael has not looked particularly great recently either. I don't know if it was bad training camps or injuries or whatever. So I do think if you were going to give Tony Ferguson a fight, this was good matchmaking in that regard, like somebody that I see paths to victory, and he probably, hopefully won't take too much damage. I'm not really sure who's going to win. I would maybe lean towards Chiesa, but I think if Tony does lose again, this should be it. I think Dana said after 2 different fights now that was going to be the last one. So I'm not sure what his contract status is, or if he's kind of getting the legend sort of, the being able to call his own goodbye. But particularly if he gets finished, if he gets knocked out, I really, really think he should stop. But I don't know. Just so many losses in a row. How can I say anything else but no?
Guys, I just had deja vu. Have we had this conversation before?
Yeah. It's a 7-fight losing streak or 8-fight losing streak?
I don't know.
I think it's like 8. I think he broke BJ Penn's record.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This would be 9.
Oh man, do you guys hope Tony wins?
No.
Just to break that streak.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
I hope for a draw.
Sorry, this will be 8. This would be 8. But yeah, I mean, a guy that hasn't had much, hasn't had a victory since 2019. It would be kind of hard not to feel good for him if he did go out there and win.
Are you talking about Miocic again, or are you still talking about Ferguson?
No, that's the last time Stipe fought.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look, I actually hate this matchup. It's at 170. Chiesa's huge. Have you seen him? He looks like a light heavyweight. And look, Chiesa's like, he's pretty good. Like, I know he's also getting older and he's up there in age, but like, I think, he went to the distance with Sean Brady. Look at how good Sean Brady has looked. I don't know. I think this is a terrible matchup. I mean, he's just going to be so much bigger than Tony Ferguson. Why the hell doesn't the UFC do Tony Ferguson versus Nick Diaz? Now that's a fight.
Yes.
That's a fight that I'll sign up for.
Especially now that there's a chance to rebook it. Like, I wish we could.
Yes.
Because you could have said, hey, Luque, you know what? You really wanted to fight. You go fight Chiesa. And now that we thought about it, since Nick can't fight, we'll bring Tony back and we'll just feature them. You're right. I would have liked that as well. Let's see. Joshua Boyd says Tony wins. Wild take, Tony wins, he says. Tindo, he's talking about another matchup. He says Kutaladze is getting slept. Beavis and Butthead says Dana has said this is likely to be Tony's last fight. And I think I've heard that as well. Josh Wall says, what if Tony KOs Chiesa? Well, that's a good one to write off on because Chiesa is a respected opponent. Beavis and Butthead says he's leaning towards Chiesa. And then Brian John says Chiesa retires if he loses. Tony would go 12 more. Crazy, man. Crazy here. Good stuff here in the chat. Yes, Crisco Wild says Tony versus Nick would be awesome. Look, aside from this past weekend's UFC 304 card and this upcoming UFC on ABC 7 card. Oh, real quick, you guys mentioned day card. I just want to give you guys the info because I know the UFC mixes it around a little bit. The fights this weekend, the prelims start at 9 Pacific, 12 Eastern, and the main card starts at 12 Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. So it's earlier this week, unlike last week. Let's talk about the big news from this past weekend. So the 12-6 elbows, Nolan, that news kind of got swept under the rug a little bit because it was fight week. UFC 304 was a solid card, 2 title fights and everything. But let's talk about that. That is the technique, yes, right there, that John Jones has his only loss pinned to because of a 12-6 downward elbow, which was an illegal strike. And referee Steve Mazzagatti stopped the fight. And when Matt Hamill couldn't continue, he disqualified John Jones. That's his only loss there. But talk about this. I know you're all over these commission hearings.
Yeah, it's big. I mean, I think oftentimes, especially now, the regulatory side of the sport, I think, is spotlighted now more than it ever has been before. So for them to come through with 2 changes, one was the 12-6 down elbow, which has been in the rules since, I believe, the unified rules were first written, which was that you can't go from 12 to 6. And that at the time they thought that those were more dangerous, that there was more gravity behind them. And since then, a lot of experts have come out and said, hey, there's no science behind that. I think we've hit a point in time where even with this rule existing, a lot of people found it pretty ridiculous. So the rules committee, they proposed that they're going to take that language out. So no more bans on the 12-6 elbows. Starting, I believe, November 1st, commissions can implement it. Now, every state is a little bit different in terms of how they write their rules. Some smaller states, they might only meet twice a year. So you might not be able to have that vote, that meeting, that implementation of the rules into their statutes until next year. So we'll have that thing that happened, I think, when they changed the knee rule a couple of years ago, where some of the commissions were using the unified rules and other ones were using the old unified rules. So there might be a little bit of confusion there, which is never great, but I think it's kind of just when you have 50 different commissioning bodies and state legislators and whatnot, it's kind of just something that happens. The second rule that they put into play was the change in the downed opponent rule. They were trying to get rid of what we would call the hand game, which is like somebody's kind of got their opponent in a front headlock. The guy's putting his hand up and down, up and down, up and down, trying to make knees and kicks illegal and then legal and then illegal. And then, somebody gets illegally kneed in the head. I think the example that was prominently used when proposing this change was Arnold Allen versus Movsar Evloev at UFC 297 earlier this year, where there was a sequence where the hand kept going up and down and there were knees being thrown. So I think they felt that it was put into place, that knee rule, to improve fighter safety, but in a sense it ended up maybe making things more dangerous, where it gave people a false sense of security, like, well, my hand's down, I'm not going to get drilled. And then, the fighter that's trying to time the hand going up and down does it wrong and somebody gets blasted. So those are the 2 rules that they voted for on Tuesday. They passed unanimously. Much bigger rules than are usually, or in recent years, have been proposed at these things. So I'm encouraged by the fact that it seems like feedback's taken into account, that these regulatory issues are being in the spotlight. I think it has the public being interested has in certain ways had regulators feel like they need to maybe take more not extreme, but make more significant changes when they have the opportunity to. So it seemed like everybody was very on board with these 2 changes. I've seen very positive responses from media, from fighters, from fans, from coaches. So good stuff. I hope that going forward, we can continue to kind of have these changes that aren't just, hey, guys can wear a certain type of tape on their elbow, or, that was the sort of stuff that was, I think, at last year's rules changes, where stuff about taping and things. So this will have an impact. It's just now it's about communicating that to the fighters and commissions, being clear about when they're going to actually start putting these in.
You're only down if your knee's down or your butt's down. No more hands.
You are only down. Correct. Yep. So that's a good way to sum it up.
Danny, Noche UFC. We kind of have an official card, and I know you're all over this. You've been down to Mexico. You really have a good survey of the land. Tell us, did the UFC nail it? Would you give it a grade? Do you have any thoughts, good or bad? What would you add? What would you subtract, maybe?
Man, I don't know if it's my OCD where things just need to be like a certain specific way, but I actually would like to see this card without the fight that I've been asking for months, which is Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili. How is Merab Dvalishvili and Sean O'Malley headlining Noche UFC on Mexican Independence Weekend? A guy that was born in Montana with Irish descent against a guy from Georgia. And you got in the co-main event, literally the first ever women Mexican UFC champion fighting an all-time great in Valentina Shevchenko. Like, what the hell? These two, Grasso and Shevchenko, should have been headlining this card, and I think it's a total disrespect to them. I think just the way you're selling it as for the Mexican people, for the Mexican fan base, and you're not putting them in the main event. I think that's pretty ridiculous. But look, as a fight itself, Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili is a fight that I've been calling for a long time, so I'm happy it's going down, but I absolutely hate that it's taking place at Noche UFC. Grasso Shevchenko should be the real main event. And everything else that they...
What if they were the co-main and Alexa Grasso and Valentina were
I
the
would
main?
stomach it. I would stomach it a little bit more. But even then, it feels out of place. Like, if you look at the card, man,
He's a big draw.
Makes sense. And that's sort of the odd fight standing out. It doesn't make sense. Just put it on another card. Do a 9-fight card. Who cares? Or just put another Mexican in there, prospect. I don't care. Shevchenko has headline already pay-per-views and has headline a ton of co-main events.
I know.
Grasso, I feel like at this point has crossed over into a star. I think that pay-per-view would do well. Plus is the whole Sphere thing. I don't feel like you absolutely need a name like O'Malley to headline that and have it be a success.
I just think that it's gonna draw better with O'Malley, and so they're trying to put eyeballs on it, and they spent a lot of money at the Sphere, I think. I mean, I kind of hear what you're saying. Like, and yeah,
Diego Lopez,
there's a lot of Mexican fighters on there.
Favorites. That fight is huge as well. Diego Lopez is an absolute star. Man, it would have done well either way, I think.
Well, Brazil's farther than Montana is from Mexico.
Huh? What does that mean?
Diego Lopez, he's not Mexican either.
He rocked the Mexican shorts, and I'll tell you this: more people are going to be rooting for Diego Lopez than Brian Ortega. That's a fact. You see it in at least on my Spanish YouTube channel. The Mexicans absolutely
I know he lives there.
Diego Lopez.
I know he lives there. He's legit. I think I'm okay with it. Yeah, you seem to be really against it.
Yes.
Though.
Yes.
What if something happens
to my brother? It's Noche UFC, hermano. But I'll say this: at least Merab Dvalishvili has done a good job at embracing the Mexican culture. I don't know if he saw this coming, like, oh, I'm going to fight on Mexican independence. But for some time now, since he fought Cejudo, he's been repping the Mexican flag and the Mexican culture. So at least there's that. But no, Grasso Shevchenko should have been the main event. Plus, historically, is a very important fight. One of the most important fights in women's MMA history.
Danny, you're getting some pushback here. Michael in the chat, brain dead take. Brian John can't decide his first name and his last name there. He's saying bad take as well. I kind of agree with them, man. Like I said, you even said just take them out and go with 9. That's how against it you are. I mean,
yes, dude. It's a Mexican themed card, and you're putting a guy that was born in Montana, an American with Irish descent, against somebody from Georgia. Makes no sense.
Okay, all right. I mean, all right. Goes last take from you, from this past weekend. I know you were pretty adamant about it.
Hold up, one more second.
Sure.
I'm gonna fire back here because I'm taking hella shots at the chat's taking hella shots at me. Crisco Wild, Noche UFC isn't even happening in Mexico. Bad news for you. Vegas used to be part of Mexico. The border got changed, and I'm not gonna get here into politics, but it is happening on Mexican soil. That used to be Mexico. So all right, I'm on my way out because I know I'm gonna get a bunch of shit now.
Goes, what about these bonuses? What do you think of Dana saying, hey, that's it, you're not going to talk me into anything larger than 50 grand? So no UFC, or sorry, no 300,000 for the historical card, or this one got talked into. Did you like what he said? I'm all about just they should up them anyways, but
I didn't like anything of what he said. I mean, look, I think we've all been this person in life before. At some point, George didn't clean his room, so guess what? Nobody goes to Disneyland. Like, we've all done shit like that, but we're not in charge of a big corporation.
That's drama being revealed.
I'm just saying, like, we're not in charge of a giant corporation like this. Like, you can't be doing this stuff. How are you you're gonna take it out on your entire roster for what a select amount of fighters did? And not even every fighter on that card did that. And really, was it the most atrocious thing? You're telling me Gregory Rodriguez wasn't trying to finish that fight? Bruna Brazil didn't hit Molly Meatball with everything she had. Daniel Pinedo, didn't he look like he was in a car crash at the end of the fight? Like, listen, dude, I've said this over and over. If you have a problem with how some of these fights play out, your problem is not with the fighter, your problem is with the sport. The sport gives you the room to fight like this, okay? You're gonna have these types of fights from time to time, but that's the great thing about your organization, Dana. That's the great thing. We get a bunch of fights. So if one of them sucks, guess what? We're going to have a good one somewhere on that card. It's not like boxing where everything's on that main event. These things just happen, man. Like you can't punish an entire roster over it. I mean, that's just not the way to go. And it's kind of dangerous grounds as far as like influencing future fighters and telling them, look, either fight the way I want you to fight or you're just not going to get bonuses. I don't think that that's fair. That's not a good look for the sport, right? Like I want to know
Which
who
he
the
kind of
best.
said. He kind of said when Belal, he's been training with those guys, so I'm not surprised he fought that way a little bit. And I don't know, like he's kind
I
of
thought that
dropped
was a
these.
good fight. That was
So
a
did
fine
I.
That
title
was a
fight.
fight.
I didn't think Mokayev's style was that bad either. I didn't find him to be this guy that, oh my God, is obsessed with wrestling or anything. If you're gonna talk about this guy, he's sometimes, I mean, look, of course he's built the UFC into something pretty special, but at the same time, he's not bulletproof. And here's what I mean by that. He's just kind of all over the place. And the problem is in sending that message, he kind of craps on his own fans. Sometimes even those are fighter takes that the fans are saying, when they're voicing their displeasure or the media or whatever. But Mokayev, yeah, the matchmaker said he was difficult. I mean, dude, there's a lot of fighters that are difficult. Somebody pointed out in the chat, Conor McGregor's throwing a dolly and ruining fights, but because he sells, right, they allow him to do some of that stuff. Or John Jones and the numerous disappointments he's had on the promotion as well, but yet they look the other way. So I don't know. Was it a sucker move? It was a sucker move, man. You don't say, hey, for Allah, for peace, we're Muslims, let's take this picture. Yeah, that was horrible. He shouldn't have done that. But if that was the reason for the cut, then I suppose. But I'm telling you, man, there are some things here that just baffle me when it comes to this. The bonus is, if that's what you got talked into, that's what you get talked into. Why do you give 200,000 to Patty Pimlet? I thought both of the arm triangles were nice finishes. They went for it. In fact, 3 of the first 4 fights ended by submission. One of the reporters said it could be that it's 3 a.m., 6 a.m. when some of these guys are fighting. He goes, who gives a fuck? And that's just his defense to yell back. Dude, hell yeah, man, it matters. How many times do you see when West Coast teams are flying to the East Coast? That's taken into play because the odds makers, the experts, know that a team's going to kind of struggle in that first quarter getting going because they're not used to the time zone. That's just 3 time zones. Back-to-back games in basketball. Even Nolan's Celtics, who are the world champions, will probably come up flat on a back-to-back, especially on the road, or the fourth game of a road trip or whatever. This is known, in all of sports, that fighters can be flat. So yeah, that might have even had something to do with it. But to just all of a sudden shut it down, I just thought that was ridiculous. And they have the money. They have the money because that's why he gets talked into 300,000 at UFC 300. This is a $14 billion company, man. All finishers should get a bonus. Does it have to be 50 if they decide to do that? I don't know, but it's time, man. It's time to do that. I just thought that was a horrible move on his part. What was not a horrible move, though, was you guys watching for the last hour. So we really thank you all for hanging in here with us. We do this every Monday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. The Junkie crew gets together and unpacks all the latest news, all the latest results. So tell a friend about it. Hit the like button on the way out. It would greatly, greatly help us with that YouTube algorithm. Go out and be a champion. We'll see you all next week.